All right, why don't we start getting going with our hypotheticals in our last part of the program. Come on in, or not. A couple of things that I've written down on my notes here on my cell phone to talk about that I didn't talk about are the concepts in people making reports of whistleblowers. Does anyone in here not know what a whistleblower is and how there is a statutory scheme to protect them? Under certain circumstances, if somebody makes a complaint about a certain type of person, they're known as a whistleblower. They've exposed something that needs to be exposed. They have a couple of protections in certain circumstances that the law provides them. And we sort of do that here in SafeSport also. So anybody that makes a complaint, as long as that complaint is made in good faith, they're protected. They can't be retaliated against. If they are retaliated against for making a legitimate complaint, even if it's not correct, as long as they reasonably believe that it was the proper thing to do, if somebody retaliates against them for doing that, they can get in trouble under our SafeSport program too. On the other side of that, if you're a whistleblower and you make a complaint because you didn't like somebody and you wanted to make life miserable for them and it was salacious and false, that's a SafeSport violation too. You can't do that. It also subjects you to civil liability and maybe even criminal liability. But if you are having to deal with somebody that says, I don't want to tell you about this, or I've told you about something, I don't want you to do anything about it because I'm afraid of retaliation, you have to remind them that they're protected in some fashion. With one exception. Somebody comes up to you and says, I don't want you to tell anybody about this because I'm afraid my son will get retaliated against, but his coach is having a sexual relationship with the goalie. That's something you can't hold anonymous. You have to tell the cops. That's a mandatory reporting issue. Once that's out in the open, it's out in the open. But you should remind folks about that. Retaliation, I talked about how that can be very subtle and how it almost has to be watched. I mean, I've got a couple of situations right now in Southern California that it's a wait and see kind of thing. We've resolved the SafeSport issue satisfactorily, and people have been appropriately notified about what it is they can and can't do. And I know I'm going to get a call, well, my son's being retaliated against because he's not allowed to play on the power play, he's getting ice time taken away and all that sort of thing. It's something that can happen, and we have to address it if it does, but it's very subtle. The other thing that I'm concerned about is people using SafeSport as a cudgel. In other words, there are, I don't believe it or not, there are parents out there that go over these rules late at night to try to figure out a way that they can game them for their own benefit or that of their children. That's a very, it's a dark statement I just made, but it's true, and I've seen people do it. That has to go into your process of evaluating these claims. It doesn't mean you don't pay attention to a claim, but it goes into the process. So I just want you to be aware of that. Okay, let's talk about hypotheticals. I just made these up. None of this stuff ever happened. It's going to start out real easy. Since this is the first hypothetical is about a billeting program, I'm going to ask Marie to answer these questions. I'm getting even for writing all those checks to you. All right, first hypothetical. You learn that your 16U Tier 3, I meant Tier 1, team has recently rostered a player age 15 from out of state, and that this player is currently being billeted by a teammate's family. What are your initial concerns with SafeSport in mind, Marie? Pardon me? Contract? What does SafeSport require that billeting family do? Either one of you, Marie. All right. Okay. The point is that the first thing you want to make sure is that every adult in that family has been screened and certified. And an adult is identified legally by anyone that's over the age of 18. I have a 31-year-old son who probably wouldn't qualify otherwise. All right. You learn that the billeted household is comprised of Mr. and Mrs. Smith, their 16U tier, I meant one, son or player, and their 18-year-old daughter. What do you do as the SafeSport coordinator for the club? You make sure that that daughter, who's 18, is certified. You also want to make sure your club has a written billet policy and that somebody, if it isn't you, is the billeting coordinator for the program. And that's even if you have one person billeting. You need to do that. Next question. Does it matter if the 18-year-old daughter attends college and lives in a dorm at her out-of-town college? Does it matter? Nope. Her primary residence, her place of domicile is still in that house and she still needs to be screened. These are kind of some of the subtle issues that come up that, and that's why I'm doing this. A lot of these questions have no real 100% right answer. All right. I'm going to ask this next one. Let me make sure I know what it is. The Blackhawks have this one locked down. I'm going to ask this of the SaberCats. A team manager reports to you that the head coach of the Squirt A team regularly counsels his players individually after practice in the locker room. First question, is this a SafeSport violation? It is not. No, it's not a SafeSport violation. But it's a recommendation that they don't do that. Right. There's no SafeSport rule that I'm says that prohibits one-on-one, but it's bad practice. That's the point. All right. You personally speak to the coach and advise him or her that good practice requires that he or she, see how politically correct I am, should never be alone with a minor player. The coach tells you that he or she is the coach and that you're not to interfere with his coaching techniques. Leave me alone. Sometimes in an Eastern European accent. What do you do? What do you think you should do in that case?
I would say it's in the best interest of the club, but we always have to go.
Well, you've already said that, and that didn't get you where you needed to be. Right. What the takeaway here is that your club needs to have a conversation. And you know what? It's okay if your club sets a rule that prohibits this type of behavior because it's not lesser than that which is required by USA Hockey. And generally speaking, if you have a rule that complies in every instance and might be more severe, as long as it doesn't conflict with USA or CAHA policies, you can have that in your club. I know that certain school districts have this as a rule, that no teacher shall be alone with a child, period. So it's something that you can do. Same coach, while talking with the coach, you notice that he has an iPad with him in the locker room. SafeSport issue? Right. It is a SafeSport issue, but it would probably require you to ask some questions. Why do you have that recording device in the locker room? Oh, it's got all my plays on it, and I use it to show videos to the kids to see how they're supposed to do things that they can't do or won't do. That's okay. But then again, you need to advise this coach who's already not following some of the rules or suggestions that you make that the SafeSport policy is that he can't use it as a recording device, period, or to take pictures, which is a recording device. That's the whole point of that. A question? Is there a question? Nope. Okay. Let's see. Let's ask the Blackhawks this question. You are the president of your hockey club and your child is on the Pee Wee A team. The team is close and the parents are all friends. Like I said, this is hypothetical. This has never happened, but it could. The teams just won the state Pee Wee A championship, and the next day you see a Facebook post of a video by one of the parents of the team celebrating in the locker room. The players are seen in various states of dress. Is this a safe sport violation? Yes.
Yes, it is. Also, if you also want to build rapport with that family, keep the team close. Before you post something like that, you want permission from every parent.
Yeah, good answer. That's absolutely correct.
And it's not as much of a organization.
It is a safe sport violation, simply put. Do you report this as a safe sport violation? Yes, you do. What do you recommend that the hockey club do? You've done the investigation. You've confirmed that there's been a safe sport violation. What do we do? Firing squad? Education is probably the best and highest form of discipline, if you will, in this case. And it's kind of interesting. If you're celebrating something in the locker room and everyone knows that pictures are going to be taken and that they're not supposed to do silly things and everybody's dressed appropriately and you want to take that picture with everyone drinking out of the cup or whatever it is that I'm talking about, the trophy cup, that's okay. You can do that. But everybody has to be on board. And it's probably still not a good idea to put this stuff up on Facebook. Just saying. All right. Are the Cougars represented here? A parent on the Bantam A team, Chris, advises you that he saw one of the assistant coaches engaging in a sexual relationship with one of the players on the team. What is the first thing that you do? If you are a mandatory reporter of sexual abuse, what is the first thing you do? You call 911. You call the cops. Back in the old days when I was in the Army, we used to have an expression, kill them all and let God sort it out. That's kind of what you do in this situation. You don't stop and think. You don't stop and notify. You call the police. What do you tell the assistant coach? Chris, I know you, and I know you tell him something. And it couldn't be repeated in this room. Well, I mean, you may tell him this as he's being escorted out of the building with his hands behind his back, but this is one of those things where you tell him that he's not welcome back until we sort this all out. That's what I would tell him at that point. I mean, the point is remove him from the environment. Because
We don't know that parent is reputable.
kill everyone, let God sort it out. It's not our job to make that determination, but it's our job to protect our children, and we always want to err on the side of caution. And if that means that coach, I mean, this happens, if this happens in our organization, before the sun sets that day, he will get a summary suspension letter from Steve. It's not our job to determine whether the allegation is true or not. In fact, the teacher that I told you about or the principal that I told you about is cooling her jets in jail because she thought it was her job. It's not a good idea. Do you have a question, ma'am?
Yeah, last year we had a student coach who was a minor.
Okay.
If that was the scenario, would you still have to, since they're both minors, call 911, or in that case?
Was a child sexually abused? If it's a minor?
A coach and a player, and it's a minor, and you see them kissing.
Well, that's not this scenario. This scenario is they're having sexual relationship.
Okay, so actual.
I'm trying to be nice.
Okay, so actual intercourse.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
then I guess. Because then it's two minors, it's.
We're dealing with a situation here where there's an imbalance of power.
Okay.
That's sexual abuse. So yes, you do. Kill them all. Let God sort it out. But that's a good question. Chris, after you report this to the police, can you conduct a SafeSport investigation? Well, good answer. Good answer. My point is, can we conduct a SafeSport investigation after the police have been notified? We can. In fact, we must. The point being that we don't do that until we've notified the police. The police are notified first. Who is the proper party to conduct this investigation? You already answered that question. That would probably be myself and Steve up the chain. And in the next quarter or early next year, it's going to be that super committee at USOC. This is the kind of claim that they're going to be investigating. Thank you very much. That's going to be wonderful. Does gender matter? It does not. If it's a girl on guy, a guy on guy, girl on girl, and this fits into the scenario where one's a child or maybe one's an adult, there certainly where there's a child involved, because the mandatory reporting involves children being sexually and physically abused, you call the cops. But the point is, gender doesn't matter. Anybody can do what they want to with that which they have to somebody else, and it's just as bad and just as reportable. Okay. What if the player was over 18? Now, I know Bantam players aren't 18, but the point is, what if the player is over 18? Is there a difference here? There's still an imbalance of power, but is your answer to the first question the same if both are over the age of 18? It's not a situation where mandatory reporting is necessary because it's not child, sexual, or physical abuse. That's the whole point of that question. Hypothetical number 5. A parent on the Bantam A team advises you that he believes one of the assistant coaches is engaging in a sexual relationship with one of the players on the team. Emphasis on he believes. What is the first thing that you do? Anybody? Pardon? Call who? 911. Kill everyone. Let God sort it out. This is just as reportable because, again, we don't have the right to do an investigation to determine whether or not his belief is accurate. We have to call the cops. May you investigate this allegation before reporting it to the police? That's the answer I want to hear in my ruminating about this. I would think under certain circumstances, some people might ask a couple of questions, the result of which, regardless of what the answer is you still call the cops. It's a touchy situation. You might have a sketchy guy making the complaint. This may be the 15th time he's made the same complaint about the coach. There are extenuating circumstances that may, but you still call the cops. Do you confront the coach? No? I think you do. I know it's hard to do, but coach, this is the matter of transparency. We've already called the cops, but you've been accused of this. Once you've called the cops, you can confront him and let him know. Not really, not necessarily, because you may be telling him as he's being escorted out the building with his hands behind his back by two burly guys in uniform. The whole point of this is that at some point in this situation, this coach needs to understand what he's dealing with. But my point is still, always call. Don't take it upon yourself. Yes, sir.
So what if that's a parent that has a vendetta against a certain coach? What does that do to the coach if it's completely unfair?
I have an expression for that I can't say because we're being recorded, but it's that kind of a sandwich, and that's too bad, but he has a remedy. I mean, if somebody is making a salacious statement like that, he has a remedy. We don't have the ability to determine that up front. We have to call the cops, and you know, these situations happen, and they're unfair in some circumstances. But overarching all of this is our obligation to protect our children and the other people that come in and out our doors on a regular basis. We can't make those quality determinations. Yes, ma'am.
The police are going to tell the parents, do not confront them.
I know.
And the DA is going to tell them, do not.
I know. I know that. I'm not talking about the parents. I'm talking about us as the SafeSport administrators.
The police are going to tell whoever not
Yeah.
the DA, so I don't.
My point is, at some point in our SafeSport investigation, we have to. After theirs is completed. And a lot of things happen in this situation. My point is that the coach isn't off limits by somebody. You're absolutely right. It's a good idea for the coach, for the parents not to do it, the kid not to do it. At some point, that discussion has to take place. Do you confront, I'm sorry.
Say something on that?
Sure.
This is also, Jason, about your question, why it's so important for the coaches to protect themselves, not be alone with the players to protect themselves. This is why, because there are people out there with vendettas or are mad that, their kid didn't get ice time or isn't on the power play. But if the coach is taking the proper steps and following the right protocols, he won't be put in a situation where this could be detrimental to his career.
Yeah, for those of you that didn't hear that, Laura makes a very good point. This is why we don't let coaches be alone with these players if at all possible. It's why we use that as a defensive mechanism so that this hopefully never arises or doesn't have an opportunity to arise. Do you confront the player and the parents? I know, hard question. Yes, ma'am.
Gather information, so you have to go through the proper. First, yes, you do have to talk to them.
Absolutely. I think you do. I think you have to at least tell them that this has been alleged, because mom and dad, you have a right to know this, and you want to protect your children just like we do. By confronting, I mean just tell them what's going on. You also might want to tell them at some point we're going to have to do a SafeSport investigation, and I may have to talk to you and maybe Junior as well. But open and transparent. Hypothetical number 6. Oh, like I said, I just make this stuff up. This never happened. During a scheduled game, player 1 intentionally tomahawks player 2 and is ejected from the game with a match penalty. Player number 1 is escorted off the ice, and on his way to the locker room, player 2's father rushes up to player 1 and commences to punch him repeatedly in the face. Father then returns to the stands. My work here is done. And player 1 goes to the locker room. You all got that in mind? I know this never happened. When does SafeSport kick in? My point is, when has a SafeSport violation occurred here? Right. I didn't want you to say, oh, the intentionally hit him with his stick on the ice to differentiate between on ice bad behavior and off ice really bad behavior. What is the first thing that you do, gentlemen in the hat? Yeah. Call the cops. Again, physical abuse, just as bad as sexual abuse in terms of mandatory reporting, you must do it. The fact that there were probably 30 or 40 witnesses is probably going to help you muster up the courage to do that, but you need to call the cops. Somebody tell me what the SafeSport process is after this. What's the things that have to happen or can happen in the context of dealing with a SafeSport issue?
Change written statements.
You open up an investigation, report it, make a determination who's going to conduct the investigation, and all of that stuff we talked about earlier today gets kicked in. Is this an incident that might result in a summary suspension? Right. Because somebody is seriously at risk, that would be at least player number one. And quite honestly, so is the father. You need to remove him from this environment because somebody's going to go punch him after he returns from jail.
So I got a question. So
Shoot.
Last year we had that incident happen. The dad didn't punch the player, but he was very aggressive when he got, it became, where we had to be escorted out of the short ice and all that other stuff. So is that reportable or where does that go?
Was there a SafeSport violation by either intimidation, harassment, physical abuse, emotional abuse of somebody?
Yell and say he's gonna
That's a SafeSport.
escort all the parents
Why
out.
didn't you call me? That's my question.
Laura would have come down there and taken care of that right away.
Seriously, John? You know my number?
Yes, that is. I mean, you've immediately resolved the problem. Somebody has escorted him out, hopefully the police or somebody. No?
Nobody escorted the parent out. We
All
escorted
right.
our parents out.
All right.
We thought they'd be waiting out by the car. This is a bad situation. The Labor Day tournament last year.
Okay. Yes, that's a.
These ice guys came and stuff like that, and they're with us.
That's a SafeSport violation that needs to be reported and investigated and dealt with, and that's probably one of those situations where ultimately, assuming everything works right, some discipline will be implemented, because that's the kind of behavior that may be incidental at one point but becomes pattern at some later time, which we want to avoid if at all possible, and get the point across and emphasize to these people that you can't behave that way. I know something happened to your child that kept him out of the NHL, but you'll just have to live with that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So the next time that happens, God forbid, you need to tell Laura, and we need to open up a SafeSport investigation and deal with it. Yes, sir.
In the case where something like this, John described, happens, and maybe the guy did get violent, landed a punch, and the ring personnel get in between you and the person, and you say, I'm going to report this to the police, and they wave you off and say, no, we've got this handled.
If a child was involved, and you are a mandatory reporter because you deal with kids, I don't care what the rink personnel says. You ever heard of the saddle rack? I used to represent the saddle rack. I know what you do. That's actually true.
So the ring can't, no matter where you are, the ring can't, personnel can't wave you off.
No, they can't. Particularly if you're in a position of authority, such as a team manager, SafeSport coordinator, somebody whose boots are on the ground at that point, you recognize that physical assault or physical abuse of a minor has taken place. Kill everyone. Let God sort it out. Hypothetical number 7. Mike, this is for you. I don't know what it is yet, but during a Pee-wee practice, you observe a coach yelling loudly at his team during drills, physically moving them on the ice and using his stick to physically prod the players during the drills. Is there a SafeSport violation by the coach? I would too. This is one of those situations where you have to speak loudly if you're on the ice, particularly when you're dealing with peewees, because they don't listen. And it's perfectly appropriate to physically touch them, to move them around if it's part of the normal coaching process to enhance a hockey skill, which is, this case, paying attention. What if a parent comes up to you during the practice and complains about the coach's actions? What would you do?
Well, I would explain just as you said, and I would continue need to watch to make sure nothing got out of hand or progressed beyond what I considered normal coaching.
Somebody sent you my hypotheticals, didn't they? Absolutely. That's the right answer. You're standing there, you're a seasoned hockey parent, you've paid $1 bazillion already, and this is a new parent who's come along, and they don't like what they see on the ice. I remember when I was coaching football, this mother came up to me and says, "Now, are you going to yell at my son?" My answer was, "Oh, yes, ma'am. And if you don't get out of my face, I'm going to yell at you too." It's a legitimate part of the deal. And you should explain it to him. But Mike, the parent makes a formal SafeSport complaint. Do you report this and conduct an investigation?
I would report what this parent did, and I would wait for further instruction to see if I should open it.
Maybe the question should be, how long do you think that investigation is going to take to be complete?
As long as the phone call lasts.
That's right. My point here is that if somebody makes a complaint, regardless of what you think about it, report it. I need to know about it. Laura needs to know about it. We need to know that the process is working. The resolution of this is perhaps a nice memo sent to mom. Dear new mom, please don't ever let your kid be a goalie. In the meantime, I pick on goalies. In the meantime, what you observed was appropriate. Here is the standard established by USA Hockey. Thank you for your concern. Enjoy your hockey season. Call me if you need to. But if you really want to talk to somebody, here's Laura's number. She would love to hear from you. Point being, you have to make a complaint. And you have to make an investigation. Hypothetical number 8. During a peewee practice, you observe a coach yelling loudly at his team during drills, and he uses profanity. He wrote in red, physically moving them on the ice and using his stick to physically prod the players during drills. Additionally, you see him firing slap shots at his players with an angry look on his face. These are peewees. This is a different situation. Is there a SafeSport violation by the coach? Most likely. Probably. I don't know how you justify angrily hitting slap shots at peewees. Well, that's probably not a good idea. If you've got a peewee that can handle them, that's their goalie. No, the point of this is a different situation. And I always like to talk about this because having had kids that have now played all the way from squirts and mites all the way through 18 youth hockey, I have to talk about the F word. You know, fabulous. No, you know the F word I'm talking about. And a lot of people are offended by that word regardless of where and how it's used. At a peewee practice, at a mite practice, at a squirt practice, maybe at a Bantam practice, no one should be using that word to encourage children. I think there are certain circumstances where that word might be appropriate, and I'll tell you a story that kind of brings this to light. My son, when he was playing 18 AAA hockey for the Junior Sharks, had an assistant coach who you all know, so I won't tell you his name. But this coach has 3 Stanley Cup rings. He has a very interesting and dynamic way of speaking. He says fabulous a lot. And I happened to walk into the locker room after they had lost a game. And this coach was using the fabulous word almost repeatedly. And I was not offended by it. I don't believe anybody in that room was offended by it. In fact, most of the players had a delicious, leering grin on their face because they were marveling at his ability to say fabulous in various different ways and conjoining it with other words. In that situation, that's probably not a SafeSport violation. However, if there's one person in that room that is offended or made uncomfortable by it, we have to tell this coach that he needs to be careful about how he speaks to people. and it might be a SafeSport violation at that point. Age is always something you need to look at in these cases, and that was the point of this. How would you handle this differently from number 7 above? Have we beat that to death? This coach needs to have a talking to. You need to open a SafeSport investigation, and it can be resolved without a disciplinary process as long as it's not a pattern. This is an incident where he was angry, it was a bad day for him, his car blew a tire, and he's going to take it out on 11-year-olds. He needs to have a nice talking to, but he doesn't necessarily need to be disciplined. But the SafeSport process has to make that determination. So you open up an investigation, you report it, and you deal with it. Probably at the club level at this point. Anybody disagree with that? This coach doesn't need certain potty parts tacked onto the walls of the locker rooms. He just needs to be directed. He needs his attitude referred and realigned. Same facts, except the team is 18 AAA. Point is that what is inappropriate for little kids may not be inappropriate. It's that nuanced explanation about what constitutes emotional or physical abuse or threats or harassment. Is this an appropriate teaching technique? Maybe he's trying to teach his kids how to deal with slap shots. They're mostly men anyway, at least physically. Like I said, I have a 31-year-old son who technically qualifies. Hypothetical number 9. After a squirt practice, a father of one of the players pulls his son aside and appears to be scolding him. Who's ever seen that? What? And I can tell you one thing. This father has never played hockey, but he knows because he's dad. The player then joins his team in the locker room, but when he comes out, the father is observed striking the player in the face with sufficient force to dislodge his hat. This actually happened. What SafeSport violations have occurred? What's the big one? Physical abuse. What's the first thing you do? Call the cops. Kill everyone, even dad. Let God sort it out. Can the father be suspended from all USA hockey activities? And should. Yes, he can be, and was. By whom? Who can do that? I skipped over this real quickly, but it's the technical and right answer is USA Hockey. But we can initiate the process and ask them to make it universal as far as USA Hockey is concerned. Point being is this is one of those issues that's dealt with at probably the affiliate level. We need to know about it. We need to take an action. We're going to be the ones that are going to send out the letters. We're going to take Tom's fingers down to the nubs by writing letters and doing all that sort of stuff. The club can do it. I mean, Dad, get out. You're not welcome. But officially, we should be the ones to do it. Yes, ma'am. Call the cops. The cops probably will call Child Protective Services. I don't know what the circumstances are, but the point is the mandatory reporting laws requires that you call the police and let them do the investigation. They might get involved depending on his other circumstances. I don't know. Hypothetical number 10. During the summer and during a rink-run bantam camp, how can this have anything at all to do with USA Hockey? Because it's in the summer? Not playing on a team? Well, it does. This is a rink that has assigned on to us, and it's run by a program that puts teams out on the ice. My point here is this is a 24/7, 365 deal in most cases. After practice in the locker room, 2 of the players engage in name-calling. A fight breaks out, and one player, still in skates, kicks and stomps the other, causing serious injury. This actually happened. Pardon? In the face. Yeah, and head. hypothetically kicked him in the face. This actually happened. Is this a SafeSport violation? It is. It happened during the summer. It happened not on a team, but it happened under the umbrella that USA Hockey has created. So yes, it is. And of course, the next question is, discuss how the rink should handle this. What's the first thing the rink should do? Call 911. They're going to triage this. They're going to send an ambulance, but they're also going to send a cop. And that's exactly what they did. And that's the right thing to do, obviously. Are both players subject to discipline? Yes, they are. And yes, they were. The problem with this is that there's a fight, there's a mutual combat going on before the really bad stuff happens. And does intent or heat of the moment matter? No, it doesn't. The point I'm trying to make here is that when somebody misbehaves to this extent, there's really no excuse. That thing on the end of his foot is a lethal weapon, and almost was in this case. And I didn't mean to kick him. Well, you kicked him. Yeah, you did. That's not an excuse. And it doesn't lessen anybody's discipline because of that excuse. We had an adult player who got suspended for the statutory time after his hearing, because at his hearing he says, yeah, I ran at the referee. I just didn't mean to hit him. Well, that's called general intent, and that doesn't matter. Just because he didn't mean to hit him, he still did, and he had this intent in his head to do something to that. He was mad at the referee and he wanted to scare him. Well, he scared him pretty good. Who should investigate this incident? Summer, rink, serious. Who should investigate this after the cops are called? Us guys. Yeah, this is an affiliate. This is an affiliate issue. Actually, Steve did. He did a great job. Hypothetical 11. I made this up, by the way. I didn't. This actually happened. As a parent, you learned that your Mite team manager has been passing out vitamins and energy drinks to the players just before they take the ice. The vitamin, by the way, is vitamin B12. You don't need to amp up a Mite player with vitamin B12 or Red Bull, the combination of which is this actually happened. SafeSport violation? What is it? Physical abuse. Drugs or alcohol. It's also harassment. It's also all that stuff. But it's physical abuse. You are the program SafeSport coordinator. What do you do? You have to call the cops. This is the type of behavior that is a mandatory report. I know that the team manager had all the good intentions in the world. We want to win. This is Mite hockey. Next stop, NHL. Got to call the cops. What should the program do? Well, as a minimum, I think they need to take Red Bull out of their vending machines and maybe screen for B12 in the precious bodily fluids of their children. The program needs to address this. They need to address this like right now. The own parent? The child. Yeah. This parent is going to have a lot of trouble with this kid, but that's maybe not something that we can do. If we see it going on in our locker room, hey, don't do that. Don't amp your kid up. That's wrong. You shouldn't do that. In fact, he may not play today because he took that substance. But the whole point of this is somebody did this under the auspices of their team managership. In other words, they were acting as us and they did this. What if all the parents gave permission? That's okay, right? No, it's not. Same result. I can't imagine that there wouldn't be one parent that would say no in that group. If it is, oh boy. Hypothetical 12. An 18 AAA team is in Michigan for a tournament. A player, let's call him Sam, has pictures of his girlfriend on his phone. They are racy. Now, we know what that means. She's in various states of undress. He shows them to his buddies because he's proud. And while he's in the shower, and the rest of this team, now the 18 players, are sitting around coming onto their B12 and amping up with some Red Bull, one of them decides to send the pictures to all of his teammates by accessing them in his phone, and does that. This happened. Fortunately, this happened before SafeSport was instituted, but this happened. SafeSport violation? Oh, yeah. This gets into all that stuff about internet. It's all of them, let's say. It's not necessarily abuse, but it's a lot of them. Harassment, that sort of thing. Should either of these two be disciplined? Hey, the guy with the girlfriend was in the shower, taking a shower when his buddy did what he did. Should he be disciplined? Absolutely. He set this in motion. He brought stuff into the team environment that created an opportunity for these guys to do this. What do you think the coach should do? This isn't in the locker room. I meant to say this is in the hotel room in a state that starts with M, after a long day of playing 2 games and everybody's tired, and coach hasn't come around to collect the phones, but he's about to. What would you do? Who's a coach here? Somebody? Coach, what would you do if this happened?
First thing I would do, small talks, depending on how old the girl is.
Wait. Stop. We're not there yet. You have. Gosh, she's ahead of me already. No, we're not going to worry about that. What do you just do practically as a coach?
Do you want my honest opinion of what I do or what I should do?
What do you think's the appropriate thing to do?
They're 18, so he's like, can't take the phone. I would call their parents or whoever is paying for their hockey, say this is not appropriate, if this doesn't end, I am going to enforce the release.
You have to address it. The first thing I want you to do is call your SafeSport coordinator, Laura or myself, and tell them what happened. This is potentially a serious incident. I think that, remember, you're out of town on a tournament in Minnesota or whatever, not Mississippi. You can send that kid home. You can do a lot of things within the framework of your team as long as it's not abusive, but that would be appropriate under these circumstances. The coach has to address it right away. Calling mom and dad is a good thing. One of the things that I would do is I would try to untie the Gordian knot that has been tied here and try to retrieve those photographs before they get too far out. Because you just send them to the group's phones. If you're technologically savvy like I am not, you can probably grab those phones and do the right deleting. I would try to recover those photographs just because. This is once this gets out into the World Wide Web, it's another problem. Oh yeah.
Take their phone, they can legally go after you, taking away whatever's on their phone. Yeah.
This is me talking for myself and not as a member of the organization. I don't care. I would still do it. Chris.
When someone makes that notification, right, because I understand what's going on here, but there's also the flip side of it, when it's common sense. And if I have 2 18-year-olds, and somebody said, hey, look at this picture I just got, hypothetically, and there's no, my point being, if you thought you saw something, but you didn't really have all the facts, and now who gets notified? So if I contact you or Laura or whoever, what other parties are then, what I'm getting at is if this was an error and it actually wasn't as bad as I thought, but now you're going to label this kid as really a normal 18-year-old probably, and now you're going to have the situation, who gets informed during the investigation process before?
Well, you kind of answered your question. Common sense does kick in, and there are a whole lot of variables that aren't in this scenario. My point is that this is the kind of behavior that we have to watch out for, hopefully stopping it before it happens. I don't know how you do that, except that you have good relationship with your teams. But my question for you is, what if, now the takeaway from all of this, first off, disclaimer, I use humor to make a point. A lot of what we're talking about here today is serious stuff. And these hypotheticals are meant to let you know that things can happen that you don't expect, and they will happen. I mean, I've had to explain to a group of mothers, because of the antics of a Bantam team, what the term teabag meant. A couple of the moms I had to explain to them twice and draw a picture. But whatever you think these kids can do, they will. Whatever you think a coach can do, it could happen. These problems don't come up to you packaged with a ribbon on them. The whole point of this exercise today is to sensitize you to this. I don't want you to be afraid. I want you to be committed to dealing with these once they happen. Hopefully none of these situations will arise. I appreciate everybody being here. Are there any more questions before we go home? Sure. All you have to do is send me an email. If you've been taking notes, you have my email address. Pardon me? Our video will eventually go on the website, too. But the point of these things are available. If you want my PowerPoints, just send me an email and I'll send them to you. All right, thanks again for attending. Go out there and be safe.